The first one is economic empowerment for women. As governments and partners, we must prioritize policies that increase women's access to financial resources, land ownership. All of us know that land is a key factor of production, entrepreneurship opportunities. And in Uganda, we have a women entrepreneurship program that is supporting women enterprises. Well, we must prioritize all these going forward. We need to strengthen social protection systems, which will enable women to balance unpaid care work and economic participation. Secondly, investing in health and gender-responsive financing. Ensuring adequate investment in women's health, including sexual and reproductive health and rights, is crucial. Health financing should consider emerging issues such as climate change, migration, and conflict. Uganda is a home to 1.7 million refugees, and all these are a result of conflict. People have to flee, and so as they flee, their whole production and support system is weakened, so we need to address these issues. All these disproportionately affect women and girls. 3, transforming leadership and decision-making. Women in leadership positions must be empowered to use their voices and influence policies. So what does this mean? That the women leaders that we have to support them and build their capacity so that they can effectively use their voices and not be mere numbers, but effective representation, as well as being able to influence the policies that affect women and girls. We need to create mentorship and leadership development programs for young women to ensure that the sustained progress. Because if we only focus on the older women that have already been empowered, we'll have a loss in the next 30 years when we come back to review the Beijing platform for action. 4, cross-border and regional collaboration. The challenges we face are transboundary in nature. Therefore, regional cooperation is necessary to develop holistic solutions. Platforms like this side event allow for sharing of best practices, fostering partnerships, and ensuring that the global policies reflect regional realities. I was having a discussion with a colleague of mine who is a member of the CEDAW committee, and the issues that were being discussed there were not anywhere near to what Africans' issues are. And when she brought them to their attention, they said, you know, your colleague before wasn't raising these issues. So we need to be able to bring the issues that are African in nature so that they are part of the global discussion on women's rights and girls' rights. Call to action. The next decade must be about action and accountability. Let us commit to accelerating the implementation of the Beijing platform for action with energy, with renewed energy and innovative solutions. I see a number of youth here, and I know you have innovative ideas that you can share as we move into the next 30 years. Governments, civil society, and private sector must work together to dismantle the barriers holding women back. I reaffirm Uganda's commitment to gender equality and urge all stakeholders present today to continue their advocacy, investment, and policy reforms to achieve a just and equitable society for all. I thank you for your kind attention. God at my country.
And thank you so much, Sarah, for delivering the keynote address on behalf of the Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development from Uganda. And at this time, I want to take this opportunity to introduce my distinguished panel. We are going to have a panel discussion, and I will introduce one by one, and then they will be taking their seats. Our first speaker is going to be Michelle Oyuga, who is a human rights lawyer and a budding feminist passionate about gender justice, with over 10 years of programmatic experience and also championing gender equality in Kenya. She works with Akina Mama of Africa as a country coordinator of Kenya. Akina Mama is a Pan-African feminist organization whose vision is to dignify and whose vision is a dignified and equitable feminist society for African women and girls in all their diversities. Join me to welcome Michelle. Our second speaker is Joanna Favor Tom Kagbo. I hope I've pronounced it really well. She's an economic justice manager from Christian Aid, and she's based in Sierra Leone. She's a gender and public health expert, public policy analyst and researcher, and also an activist of women's rights issues in Sierra Leone, but also across Africa. Join me to welcome Joanne. Then with us, we also have Ambassador Judith Sijen, who is a lawyer and a women's rights activist and a former deputy head of mission for Kenya to the Netherlands. And she's also here with us as a panelist. Welcome, Ambassador Judith. And lastly, we have Leila Sharafi. She is the chief of Gender, Human Rights and Inclusion Branch, Program Division at UNFPA, or United Nations Population Fund. And Leila's role at UNFPA is she leads a global team working on the organization's global gender equality and human rights mainstreaming and programs. And with her, she brings a wealth of experience spanning to 20 years in international work and also focusing on promoting gender equality. Join me to welcome Leila. So I will still use this space. We will start with Michelle. Michelle is going to talk to us as you're all aware, we are here because of the Beijing +30. So Michelle is going to talk to us about the importance of Beijing to Africa in general and the East and the Horn of Africa. Why is Beijing important now more than ever before? Beijing Platform for Action is what we're talking about, not Beijing, China. Over to you, Michelle.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am delighted to be here alongside the other panelists. And I will be speaking to you, sharing with you why the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action is now more than ever. And I am happy that we always start to have this organization. So when I was growing up, back when I had, there were stories, and I had that people went to Beijing, that women went to Beijing. And I did not know where Beijing was or what this Beijing was all about, but clearly people went to Beijing and people were talking about it. So I had that women went to Beijing, and they came back, and they came back with something that shaped the world. Many years later, when I proceeded with my schooling, I later found out that there was a convening that was held, part of the UN conferences that was held in Beijing, and the outcome document was the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Years later, when I joined civil society and was working for a women's rights organization, I had an opportunity to skim through it, read it, understand it, and I was like, wow. Clearly, in 1985, when women came together, they made a bold statement, and it echoed across the world, including down in my village. A local man, local women knew something happened in Beijing, and heads were going to roll. Fast forward. Now we are in 2025, and we are commemorating 30 years post the bold commitment for state. And I want you to just take a moment to picture the commitments that were made in 1995. If you were to realize these commitments, what should they want to like? Would it just be so beautiful? Would live at a world free of violence, with women supporting governance, there would be economic like the world would be good. But sorry to bring you back to the reality that while we have made progress, we have also experienced challenges and even setbacks. And I do not want to be to just dwell on the negatives, but perhaps start with the positives. So as a result of the bold commitments and the discussions that were held, we have seen traction, which many of you have implemented and have shared different spaces and platforms over the years, including this year's EASSI. So as a result of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, you can pinpoint a number of progress that has been achieved because of this. We are seeing legal reforms that are working to strengthen or that have been shaped towards strengthening protections for women and girls. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action is also has been laid. We have had that in most of these African countries, including Kenya. We have been churning out legislation. In my country, they say that we are not, the problem is not legislation, the problem is implementation. But because of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, we have seen a push and we have been able to realize progressive laws and some laws are aimed at advancing gender equality. And I'll give examples. I'll give examples. Like in Kenya, our constitution, which renowned as one of the most progressive constitutions in the world, underscores gender equality. We have quite progressive provisions in it. We had in Uganda, they also have made advancements in terms of legal reform. We had about the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act. We had about changes to the penal code. So yes, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action has laid the foundation for us to be able to achieve gender responsive laws and policies. And also as a result, we are seeing increased women's political participation and even inclusion in governance spaces. And we are also seeing involvement or enhanced enhanced economic empowerment for women across the region. And we're also seeing women take place or lead or facilitate in peace and security efforts. But why are we here? And why are we reflecting on why this is important more than ever? We all know that the Beijing Declaration on Platform for Action has 12 critical areas, and we have been talking about it. We have been analyzing what these critical areas mean and what the different countries have been able to realize and put in place with regards to the 12 critical areas. So it is indeed still true that the Beijing Declaration on Platform for Action provides a framework for different actors, both duty bearers and rights holders, to be able to work towards achieving gender equality. So it's a roadmap. It's a light, it's a light in a guiding light for us to be able to continue advancing gender equality. And also also important, it connects economic, political, and social rights. So it's a blueprint for us to be able to make the connection. We always talk about the intersection. If you look at the Beijing Declaration of African Action, we are able to make connection between these particular areas. And then, of course, we still have unfinished business with the Beijing Declaration of African Action. It's 30 years. We are seeing progress. We are also seeing that some areas are still stalling, and we're also seeing regression. This year, the last 5 years specifically, we are concerned about regression. That yes, we made steps, but now we are seeing some of these steps being rolled back. We are seeing opposition challenging and disputing some of the gains we have won over the years. And I'd like to specifically speak about sexual and reproductive health. We have had the contention between reproductive health and reproductive rights, and us trying to divide the two, like we go with health and we not speak rights. So there's still unfinished business. We have had narrations of how in the different East African countries we're still grappling with women's political participation. I'll speak for Kenya because I'm from Kenya. We are still with regards to the two-thirds gender rule. But the constitution, our constitution speaks of, provides that not more than two-thirds should be represented without same gender in this leadership position. We've not been able to come up with a specific legislation to address that, and we've also not been able to achieve these numbers. So yes, we have unfinished business. And we are also still struggling with structural inequalities and patriarchal structures that impede the advancements in the 12 critical areas. And as a result, we are seeing regressive policies. We are seeing rollback in terms of the laws that are being passed. We are also seeing challenges with social norms that continue to perpetuate stigma and discrimination. So what must we do? We were told earlier that these conversations have happened around 30 years. So what must we do? We keep saying that our governments have the primary responsibility to promote, protect, defend our rights. And as civil society actors, our role is to, ensure accountability, complement where we can, and work with the state to be able to fulfill this its responsibility. But then again, we must also roll up our sleeves because opposition is also working to undo what you have been able to achieve over the years. Patriarchy is fighting back. Patriarchal structures are getting emboldened by the day. So we must continue to defend gender equality from attacks, and we must resist and push back, especially with the use of laws. When laws are being used to curtail gains that we've been able to achieve over the years. And then most importantly, hold governments accountable. Right now, we have had conversations around the cut of foreign aid. And I'd like to quote our former president, who said, I do not understand why you're complaining about foreign aid being cut, America cutting foreign aid. If you don't pay taxes in America, why are you complaining, right? So, in a sense, I know there are a lot of people able to understand it differently, but there's something the president was trying to say, that you know what, at the end of the day, the primary responsibility lies with the security of your government. So when it comes to the Beijing Declaration on Platform for Action, what is our government doing? How do we ensure that the gains we have received, we have had over the years are not being rolled back? And to ensure that the commitments that were made in 1995 translate into real policy and translate into transformative change for women and girls.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Yes, thank you so much. She has spoken quite a lot on where we need to be, where we are now, and the journey that the Beijing Platform for Action has taken over the 30 years. So now we are going to hear from Joanna Tom, talking to us about structural and systematic barriers that still exist and have delayed progress in realizing women's economic justice, women's rights, and gender justice. Over to you, Joanna.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jocelyn, and good afternoon again, colleagues. I'm very delighted to be here. I want to start my statement just to pick on what the question that the ambassador posed during her statement. She mentioned that 20 years, they've been coming to Beijing, maybe well, 20 years. Some of us here might be, maybe this is our first time, or some of us just the second time we joined the force, you know, with our ancestors, with our mothers, with our elder sisters to be coming. And even for this past week, we've been in conversations. And many of these conversations seems to be repeated of the same issues. And sometimes I try to mimic the statements or the speeches from our leaders. So progress has been made, but it's slow. I think that statement continues to re-echo in many of the events that we find ourselves beyond the CSW. And I have a question or a comment to pose as why. Why is it that 30 years from now, we're having the same conversation? And my sister mentioned here, let's look at the 12 critical area. If the progress that was supposed to be made on those critical areas, if we had made at least even 60% of those progress, those commitments around the 12 critical area, where we are being now, especially when we talk about gender equality. And I say why? Because of the structural issues. We're still asking the same questions. We're still discussing the same issues. We're still slow with progress or even going 2 steps backwards because structural issues have not been addressed. Until and unless we address those structural issues, I believe we still continue to ask ourselves and to having this kind of conversation over and again. Structural issues around political will, structural issues around the power dynamics that play from the colonialism up to where we are today. We need to ask ourselves around the structural issues, have they been addressed? I think many of us here that have been in programming, before we go into our intervention, we try to analyze the problems. And most of us here have used problem trees to look at what are the root problems. It's just an example of if we want to grow our trees, we want to see the trees flourish. We focus on paying more attention to the roots. And if the root is not being sufficiently taken care of, then obviously your tree will die. And that's where we are. The structural problems are still existing. And I believe that many of the world leaders, as well as our national leaders, are aware of these problems. They are aware. So the question that we should be asking is, what are the actions are we taking? And how structural are those actions that we'll be taking? How are they addressing the needs of women, the needs of our girls? It's something that we need to ask. Of course, Beijing 12 critical area is very clear. I've been saying that. The 14th, we also had a session here. It's very clear. When you read the 12 critical area, it's a strategic objectives. And all these objectives have like a particular institutions being pointed at in the area of their roles and their responsibilities and what is expected. It is not a loose document. It tells you what the government should do, what civil society should do, what international government and INGOs should be doing. It also tells you what the international and the global financial institution should be doing. And I want to cite an example from my work that we do. We do economics, gender, just macroeconomic policies. We look at the macroeconomic policies to see how the policies are formulated. How are they addressing issues of gender equality? And when I look at the critical area on women and the economy, you look at the strategic objective F, it tells you what is expected. And I want to pose a question here. I think one of the objectives that was set for international financial global institutions is to work with the government to do a gender impact assessment of their structural programs. And I want to ask all of us here, I'm from Sierra Leone. I want to ask us from Kenya, from Uganda, from across Africa, how many governments have worked with the IMF and the World Bank to do a gender impact assessment of the programs that they are funding in our. Another commitment is that macroeconomic policy should be formulated from the genderless perspective. So until we look at some of these issues, how committed we have been engaging with the Beijing review for 2025. I've been able to read reports from 8 countries in Africa around the progress that countries have made. And I will tell you that when I focus on the women and the economy, most of the actions that are in those reports are still intentional. They are intentions. You see that some of the countries, I don't want to name names, some of the countries that we are even pointing at right now, in terms of even the time user survey. Let me say Kenya, for example, was done in 2020, 23-24, last year. And you want to ask yourself, why did they do that? Because they are working towards meeting the 2025 review. So it's for me, it's like a tick in the box. We have done time user survey, tick the box. Where I'm coming from, my country now, Sierra Leone, we're not even talking about the care policy. The unpaid care work. There is no policy on that. Kenya, Ethiopia, they mentioned that they're working, it's in progress. But there are some countries who have not, and these are the critical areas that we are prescribed. So the commitment is a prescription. When we go back to our work, let's look at the document. It is a prescription. It is a right instrument for gender equality. It is prescribed. So when we engage our policymakers on the care work, let's look at that policy. When we engage in terms of investing in healthcare, let's look at the policy. Now, quickly, just to wrap up as in the area of why I'm really here around structural issues around macroeconomic policy. It's very critical. If the policies around macroeconomic is not addressed, we are not getting there. Women participation in political positions require them to be economically empowered. If you're not empowered economically, you don't even have the space to compete with the man. We've seen in some of the countries where, for example, a man and a woman contesting to becoming a member of parliament. I've seen where a parliamentarian is telling a woman, this is not your space. You are a caterer, you need to go to do your catering. You're not educated. Why? Because of these structural issues. Now we have an economy that is neoclassical, that is capitalism, that is focused on economic growth, rather than women's human rights issues. That's the economy we have right now that is operating in Africa. 54 countries are in debt crisis. I think all of us are aware of that. Our governments are trapped in debt. It's a trap. For example, where I'm coming from, my government is spending 8 times on service in debt rather than investing in healthcare. And then it's the same for Kenya. So when we look at our macroeconomic policies, it's the same. Your Finance Act is the same like my act in Sierra Leone. Now we have 5% being taxed on rice importation. We have governments investing in regressive taxation rather than progressive taxation. More of the GST. Then we want the woman to thrive in their trading. We want them to thrive economically. And those women, for example, in my country, the VAT, we call it just goods and services tax. The government reduced the threshold. What that means, even the woman that is selling vegetable is now being taxed to pay taxes. And what that means when we engage the women, their businesses are not thriving. So, because government is indebted, how do we expect the government to invest in the healthcare? Yeah. They are now investing in debt repayment and they're not investing in healthcare. And what that means, we see that many of our countries now, if you ask now, who is in charge, which company is supplying your electricity, you find out that it has been privatized. Electricity has been privatized in my country. Telephone has been privatized in my country. But even our airport has been privatized. So you see that the role of the state has been shrinking. And now it is now in the care of our development now is in the care of private sector. And what that means for the private sector, their interest is profits. It's not human rights. It's not our development. It's profits. So I think until we go back to the drawing board and say, how do we unpack these structural issues? And there is a way. So we now have the FFT that is coming in July this year in Spain. It is a platform that has been created for financing for development. And our government will be there to vote on the UN tax convention. This is the early call for civil society. So all of us, we need to come together to rally our government to ensure that the UN tax convention, because that is the one that is going to look at the multilateral cooperative taxation that will ensure that government is really being able to free from the debt and able to invest in these sectors. Otherwise, it's gonna be the same story all over again. So I think we need to go back to the drawing board.
Okay. Thank you so much, Joanna. The time was up. I didn't want to cut you short because the discussion was really going on well. Thank you so much for sharing with us issues to do with macroeconomics, policies, and how we need to have a gender lens in there, and some of the structural issues that we are still facing as a continent. Our next speaker is Ambassador Judith. She's going to speak to us about the focus on health financing for women and girls as a fundamental pillar in advancing gender equality. She will also give focus on some of the emerging issues like climate change, migration, peace and security, because these are issues as emerging as they sound that we can't do away with. We need to be cognizant about. Over to you, Ambassador Judith, in the next 10 minutes. Yes, you can have this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I will try to break. When it comes to women issues, the women always begin at a disadvantaged stage. The previous speakers have talked about it. Economically, they are not empowered well. Socially, they are still behind. Politically, they are also still fighting for their space. all those gains that women have fought for, we still have challenge. So when it comes to health, you find that we are still at a disadvantaged state. There's a lot of underfunding in the health system, and that is within the East African, but most countries, especially East Africa. You find the private partners like the African Development Bank, World Bank, and others have taken initiative, they've done research, they've prepared reports, and even with these reports, we find that a lot still needs to be done. The health is not trickling down, especially to the low income women, with health financing. So the gender gaps remain in place even after all women have been fighting for year in, year out, as Ambassador Irene has said in the beginning. WHO also did a report and has confirmed that African countries, especially the East Africa, are yet to adhere to the 15% national budget which should be allocated to healthcare, as was done and declared in the Abuja Declaration. You find like 2022-23, Kenya's national budget in health was only 4.4%, Tanzania 5.7%, Uganda only 6.2%. Rwanda came to the closest with only 9.6%. And you find out of this the entire national budget. So you can imagine what is given to the women health or financing the health for women. Kenya gave only 6.6% of this 4.4% of the national budget. So, and whenever there are any emergency within in the country, like we found national calamities like the COVID or insecurity, you'll find that it is the women aspect of the budget that's chopped. And you find like now, if there's free maternity care, women now have to pay for it, buying gloves for those access to delicate healthcare, reproductive healthcare services, and even many other things. So in that context, we find that a lot should be done. And we find even within the climate change, women are really the sufferers. Where there is drought, it's the women who collect the firewood, they look for water, cooking, and they give birth, they need water, they don't have that access. And the little financing is being done. There's a lot of emergency insecurity, like in DRC, we've seen what is happening. Little is being done to go outright in financing healthcare, and especially for them. So we still need to do a lot, as someone was saying, we go to the drawing board. But I would say there'll be some recommendations that we can come up with. Like, for example, we can increase public investment in women health. Government should go outright, allocate a lot of more money for health in women issues like reproductive health care, because maternal mobility is still on the high, and these are national things that have to be done. And then we're going to also expand health insurance coverage. We know insurance is a bond in the flesh. Unless you have that delivered access to, you give women access to their health care, they will not survive. Because I remember in 2014-15, when I was in Parliament, I sponsored a reproductive health care bill, which was going to be so comprehensive to give access to quality and easy, affordable, as a matter of right to the women. Because the issue of women still being carried in wheelbarrows, pregnant, will give birth, and all other things, roadmap of contraceptives, or healthcare or trained healthcare service providers. I was told it's too expensive. And now it's when I understand why we were saying it was too expensive. It took time to understand why my bill was being shut down. In Kenya Parliament, they are still trying, our sisters today, but to try to fight for it, so that at least it will ensure access to affordable and financing all the healthcare services. We also need to enhance public-private partnership. We find that healthcare is not only provided by the government, they may not afford. We find other partners like the churches, the other financials or employers to provide good healthcare. And the other issue is we should empower the women. Education, yes, is important. But as said, women begin at a disadvantaged starting point. Repugnant traditions, you find FGM, under FGM, you marry low, you give birth, no birth control, and you have no access even to proper healthcare services. And you find that with these women, their futures are destroyed, and we need to enhance all that and tell them that we need girls and not rights with the future so that we can be on the same level. As we have said, there are several the challenges that women face, and there's the lack of maternal and reproductive healthcare services, which even the World Health Organization has acknowledged in several reports. It is normally very painful to see that women are still dying out of unsafe abortions or complications that come up. And the word abortion, termination of pregnancy, miscarriage is one of them. We've seen, like in Kenya, many doctors have been arrested because they have assisted. They have saved a life because of excess bleeding, and especially the young girls, the teenagers, they go through those sufferings. So we need legislation which are outright and clear that will provide a stop. Like in Kenya, as Sister said here, we have a good constitution that talks about protecting the life of a woman. That is, abortion is allowed if it is going to protect the woman. But in the implementation stage, it becomes delicate. Was it an abortion? Because the penal code says that's killing, and the issue of when does life begin at conception, yeah, and those complications. So we say that there need to be clear-cut policies and legal frameworks that will protect the women, and they are heavily financed within the health facility, so that we move on and we achieve what we wanted. Again, the other challenge is the financial budget. Many women don't have access to healthcare finances. They don't have insurance covers. They will treat themselves to using out of pockets. And the out of pockets, we have a monster called cancer now. Very expensive to handle. Unless you have a comprehensive medical insurance cover that will support, then we
One last one.
yeah, then we will have no options but continue suffering, because it's not only for the low income, even the high income. If you do not have an adequate comprehensive insurance cover, we find a lot of, like Kenya, there's a lot of exodus of people going for treatment in India. It's very expensive. All those facilities should be provided in the country so that we can save lives. I will leave it at that so that the rest we can
Discuss in plenary.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much, Ambassador Judith. She has talked a lot about health financing, about health insurance coverage, public investment on women issues, finance policies to protect the women, and a lot more. Thank you so much once again, Ambassador Judith. Our last speaker is Leila Sharafi, UNFPA. She's going to speak to us about charting the new path, just like the theme was saying. How do we enhance the impact of the Beijing platform for action on gender equality and women's empowerment, which is more of the way forward? How do we make this space more meaningful, more effective to the women and girls empowerment? Over to you, Leila.
Thank you so much, moderator. It's a pleasure to be here and to follow these wonderful, powerful statements from this panel here to meet esteemed panelists. Thank you to EASSI, Akina Mama, and Afrika and Christian Aid for inviting UNFPA, UN Population Fund, works in 150 countries around the world. We focus on sexual reproductive health and time, health, family planning, addressing gender-based violence, harmful practices, population data, all of these issues that even Ambassador Judith was talking about, sexual and reproductive health and rights. I'll just start off by saying, of course, as we heard, maybe you'll forgive me, I'll reiterate some of what was already said, but it's been 30 years since that pivotal landmark regressive achievement was made by those strong women who went to Beijing. I myself was thinking, how old was I? I had just started high school myself. So was not even in that world of thinking about those issues, but soon came to find out about what Beijing was. But also its sister framework, which in UNFPA we talk a lot about it. It happened 1 year before, in 1994 in Cairo, Egypt, the International Conference on Population and Development. And its program for action, which changed the way we think about population issues and women's roles in reproduction and putting really human rights at the center, and reproductive rights at the center of development. So many women and girls have benefited from both of these programs. There's no doubt when we look at the 30 years what we've achieved. But so many women and girls have not. And the data shows us that it's oftentimes those who are left behind, whether it's, related to, different factors, right, which but I think it's also important to do things in perspective globally to show and say that no country in the world, in fact, has achieved gender equality fully. Some maybe closer than others. Yes, there's a gender inequality index, ranks countries according to different indicators. I mean, these are all blunt instruments, but anyway, it's important to point that out, that all countries have a way to go. In fact, when we look at gender-based violence, there's no country in the world that's not afflicted by this issue. Every community is touched by this. 1 in 3 women around the world still statistically face some kind of violence in her lifetime. And new data has come out saying that every 10 minutes, actually, a woman is killed by her intimate partner or even someone in her family. So, I think the world has a long way to go. We've achieved many, many things. Maternal mortality has been halved, but then in the last 10 years, the statistics haven't changed. They've stagnated. So what's going on? More women have access to family planning than ever before. We have to applaud that we have more laws on violence against women globally. And that's really, really a huge achievement in even the last half century. And also we should recognize in Eastern Africa region, many strides have been made from, again, enacting laws to address gender-based violence or harmful practices, but also improving access to girls' education, which is such a protective factor for many of those issues around LGBT and harmful practices. Increasing women's political participation, as my esteemed panelists have said, whether that's quotas or affirmative action or other measures. But the truth is, and as others have said, women remain significantly underrepresented in public life and in decision-making spaces. Not just outside the house, but also in the household. Some of our SDG data tracking shows us that only 53% of women globally say they can make their own decisions about their health care, access to contraception, and sexual relations. So that agency and autonomy is really challenged. But I do want to point out some of the achievements, and my colleagues who work with the EASSI, whether that's the East and Southern Africa Regional Office of UNFPA or our team that's based in Nairobi, gave me some wonderful statistics. And we know that women's decision-making in public life is quite, we should celebrate the achievements such as in Rwanda, which had 61.3% women's representation in public office, and Ethiopia 41.5%. And this is a region which are among the top 25 globally for women's parliamentary representation. Yet we know systemic barriers are there, both in the economic realms, as was said, which, you know, at the end of the day, if a woman cannot access equal land, credit, technology, economic resources, then it's really going to be a huge challenge for her to realize other forms of empowerment. We talk a lot about in our organization, you know, the increasing conflicts, the displacement, the climate change, economic shocks, and it goes on and on and on. But we also see in the shrinking civic space, now we also see increasing backlash, the pushback on gender equality. What's happening? It was happening. All of us working in this field, we know what's happening. Now we see it with new intensity, combined with the financial cuts, combined with different political changes. It's really getting intense and more harder for women and human rights defenders and the feminist movement and youth-led and women-led organizations. But I'd like to focus in on one particular issue that worked with you on, with EASSI on related to a form of discrimination that women and girls face to this day. And I want to point out female genital mutilation, FGM, because this is a program which we work on in UNFPA with UNICEF and partners, and in 17 countries specifically. But we've observed some results with regards to declines in prevalence of harmful practices like FGM and child marriage. So for instance, globally, and I want to point out that FGM, by the way, you're saying it's a global issue, because it's in Africa, but also across the Middle East and Asia, and in diaspora communities when they travel and migrate to other parts of the world. But the good news is, over the last 2 years, we see FGM prevalence reducing from 1 in every 2 girls to 1 in every 3. So it's like we're taking 1 step forward, 2 steps back, but we're incrementally getting there. For the region, there are notable countries like Uganda and Tanzania, who, my colleagues tell me, according to the data, are on target to meet the Agenda 2030. As harmful practices is an SDG target and under Goal 5, while Kenya and Ethiopia need to accelerate 5 times to meet the SDG target. But the good news is, after years of programming, we know it works. Our evidence shows us that, number 1, community dialogues with parents and religious leaders, and also involving health workers and health education, does shift attitudes towards abandoning FGM. Similarly, number 2, media and social marketing also change supportive FGM attitudes. However, we need significant investment to take these interventions to scale and to sustain. That is the challenge, right? We know what works, but the issue is how do you continue it into the future and how do you take it to scale? So, as I said, UNFPA with UNICEF largest program to accelerate the elimination of FGM in 18 countries. Sorry, I stand corrected. We just recently added Indonesia, our first Asian country to join the program. And the idea behind this program is that the interventions will go from the grassroots to the global level in partnership with public and private sectors, as you talked about, public-private, social education, health, religious, economic, and political fields. In 2024 alone, 12,250 grassroots community-based organizations and action groups in 18 countries were integrated into coalitions and networks working to eliminate FGM. with about 3 million people engaging in public declarations. This is very much an important milestone for the FGM practice reduction. Now, the Beijing Platform for Action, 12 areas of concern, underscore the important role of social and gender norms in perpetuating gender inequality. These are, I would say, the last frontiers, changing hearts and minds. As you all said, there's beautiful laws, great policies, but it's the hearts and minds and people's attitudes and community norms, even in institutions, the norms that keep the patriarchy going. As you said, I really like that. I think this pushback is very much the patriarchy pulling us back, saying, you've made progress, we're not going to let you go forward. And so I think those programs, using the FGM program is one indication of how those norms can be shifted, but it takes really concerted effort from a multi-sectoral, holistic approach, working at all the levels, whether it's the parents, the community, the religious traditional leaders, the lawmakers, etc. But anyway, before I close, some key recommendations for moving us forward, leaning on the FGM program, but not only on some of our work on gender equality. Others have mentioned it, but it's worth reiterating. Governments must commit clear, measurable targets and allocate adequate resources. At the end of the day, it's about the implementation. Regional bodies such as the African Union, Intergovernmental Authority in Development, the East African Community should enhance monitoring, peer learning, cross-border cooperation, including on issues around trafficking, migration, distant resilience, and as we would all say up here, with the gender lens. Civil society organizations really, I guess, have to work cross sectors and build alliances across movements, whether you're talking about, the rights of women with disabilities, the rights of other leaving no one behind groups, to really drive that kind of alliance building. And something to the donors and international partners, what we keep hearing about is these feminist funding principles. Feminist funding principles really call for long-term, flexible core funding to civil society and particularly grassroots organizations and women-led organizations. These NGOs, they can't keep operating on these annual budgets. You don't know what's happening next year. You don't know what your program looks like. And how can you sustain that, right? And many of them are, but that feminist funding principle is so key. Innovation and youth are also important. That goes without saying. Youth are the future. But oftentimes, it's tokenistic sometimes when we bring them in. How can we make sure it's meaningful, that they're really influencing these spaces when they're talking to policymakers and so on? It's not just that, oh, we brought a young person here. How can we make sure that it's a meaningful exchange? So from our side, we as UNFPA, with our partners, we remain committed to the landmark vision of Beijing and the ICPD program of action with partners like EASSI, who've really been working with us side by side, engaging policymakers, regional bodies, religious leaders, grassroots. I mean, we all need to continue to come together and advance regional frameworks like the East African Community FGM Bill and cross-border FGM action plans. So as we're here in the CSW celebrating 30 years, I do hope that, as my fellow panelists said, in 30 years, we are no longer talking about these issues. Hopefully it won't even take that long, but I fear it may. And that we really see true change for women and girls across the world, but also in the East Africa region. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much, Leila. She has talked about charting the new path, what needs to be done. But she has also recognized some of the efforts that has already been put in place, the little things or some of the things that have already been done in line with the Beijing Platform for Action on the 12 critical areas, but also the journey ahead on what has to be done. So at this time, we are left with a few minutes. I want to call on our audience, both online. We have people online, but we also have our colleagues who are in the room. We are opening up the discussion, questions to our panelists, or comments or additions to the conversations are now welcome. My colleague Peter Mark will be coming to you. You put your hand up, then we bring the microphone to you. And to our colleagues online, you can also put your hand up, and we'll give you a chance to speak.
Thank you, I'm very few from Ghana. Now, that's very. Just want to somehow highlight some of the issues that have been mentioned or yeah, just about the women decision making. I can give an example of Rwanda. They become 3.7% in the parent. But I would say that as much as we have a big number of women decision making, when you go down to the lower levels, you find the number of women very limited, especially the technical roles or positions. And this is going with women's mindset. They have such roles, especially in decision making, because they have other roles to play. When you put down like the Senate, we have 53, but when you touch the cabinet, you have 35.48%. And then when you go to the district level, we have the political appointments like the mayors. It's the men are 30%. While we have the vice mayors or the deputy vice mayors, the roles of the social players are mainly given to the women. You find the big number of vice mayors is 74%. But when you go to the economic vice mayor, they are mainly men. You find they are like 46 point, they are 70 vice mayor who are women. And then the economic, you find they are the men who are the majority. So when you make analysis of this, you find that there are still some positions that they are meant for men. I just gave an example of Rwanda. We are happy to have the first woman as the governor of the central bank, the first woman as the prosecutor, and the chief justice. Then I want to talk about an issue that was raised as the backlash. I think after Beijing, much emphasis was put on women. We did pay attention to the men, and today we are going back to engage the men. Somehow there is something that was lost. And when you talk of gender, it's always associated with men or with women, which is the challenge. I mean, which is not right. It's like we are going back and we are using a lot of energy and resources to educate the men. With that, I'm also asking myself, what are we doing with the young generation? Our children back home, how are we bringing up? How are we bringing them up so that we don't waste any other time? Considering that maybe some of us were a generation that at one time cannot be participating in such programs. It's important that we bring up both boys and girls in the same way. Then I want to take another issue is about the mindset of women and men. I think even women as we are victims of the patriarchal system and social norms. If I can give an example, when you go to some of our communities, you find the men complaining that they are becoming victims of gender.
And women have misinterpreted gender. On the other one hand, it may be due to the backlash that has been mentioned, or they just intentionally don't want to accept the reality. Then I want to highlight about
As you conclude,
sorry,
the interest of time.
budget. I know in some countries, including Rwanda, it has been regulated. But when you look at what is in the budget and the reality at the ground, sometimes you find there are variations. What are those interventions? Are they responding to the needs of both men and women? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Betty. In the interest of, I don't know whether there is another. Okay, over to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Apere. I'm happy to be in this event, seeing you just up there, because I'm a former staff of EASSI and I happen to have worked very closely with that person. So I'm proud of it.
Thank you.
And thank you to the panelists this afternoon. I think we really justice to the topic at hand, chatting new paths. And as I was listening again, I wondered whether we should be celebrating 30 years or just sitting back, reflecting on what has worked and how we need to scale it up, but also ensure that it's sustainable. And the reason I'm asking this question is because going by the statistics, you know, in Africa, we believe in seeing results. You can dig from morning till evening, but if we don't see the crops at the end of the season, you will not convince any of us that you are actually doing a good job. So looking at some of the statistics that were shared this afternoon around, you know, the budgetary deficits, how we are all operating in debt, the corruption, all these very bad things that we had. I just wondered, are we making progress or are we actually backtracking? And related to that is the question of harnessing demographic dividends. Because in Africa here, we have a very young population, over 60% young people, and by young, 25 years of age, you can imagine. Those of you that have been through most of these airports, you notice that our young people are going to the Middle East to go and get into modern day, I call it modern day
Slavery.
Going by the social media report status. So how are we going to change that trajectory and, you know, harness the demographic dividends? Begin to see these young people as assets and not what they are currently. And then finally, is who is documenting our progress? Because as I was listening to the statistics, I just wondered what the situation was in 1995 or 1994, so that we are able to measure ourselves and say, we are actually progressing or retrogressing. And I asked that question in view of what, Joanne? I think Joanna is the one who said, where were we when these people went to Beijing? Most of us were young, looking at the people in the room, but we are here reflecting on Beijing plus 30. So for the next 30 years, how will we be able to measure our input or our, you know, our contribution to this whole gender equality journey if we do not have baselines, if we don't have data that clearly shows, you know, the journey that we've been traveling since 1990. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. She has talked about a number of issues. Should we really be celebrating the 30 years? Online, we have a hand from, I can't see, but we have a hand from Okpol. I think if I pronounce your name well, please proceed in the next 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you very much. The team, the moderator, and all those who are presented. My name is Joseph Opul. I'd like to thank all of you for this commendable sharing. I have two issues. One, I would like to share experience on how we have been helping women. In 2022, we got a project from African Development Bank to train women in Busega market in Kampala. Bearing in mind that the biggest challenge women have is the land ownership. So we started what we call a cash plot, because one woman, a poor woman, is not able to buy a plot. So these women are in groups. They collect their money. Maybe this month they buy for Rita, next month they buy for Josephine, next month they buy for this. So I think this is a very good model. Many people have gone there. Those who are on the women issues in Uganda, they have gone there to learn something. So I thought this is something that is worth sharing with you people. Time is not enough. And then lastly, under Paul Skilling Foundation Africa, we are saying that how is it better to stop the bus from behind or stop the bus from in front? Because most of the interventions as far as women programming is concerned within Uganda, East Africa, Africa, and globally, most of them tend to stop the bus from behind. After the bus has passed, then now we start in the intervention. So we are starting a very ambitious project of 20 million business startups for young, youthful, and women, so that most of these issues, if the young girls can start having their income generating activity when they are still young, by the time when they reach 20 years, 30 years, I think they will be economically empowered. Of course, it doesn't mean that once you are economically empowered, all your problems are sorted. But I can assure you that I think many of the things we are discussing here, many of them stem from economic subjugation of women. So I would like to request the members here, let's join up hands. No, this is a very ambitious project of 20 million business startups, and we're targeting within a period of 10 years. If I don't achieve it, I have it in my will that those who will remain behind me, either my family or the organization, must achieve the target of 20 million business startups for women, only women. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. In the interest of time, we'll have one other. There's two. In half a minute, there's the honorable member of the East African Legislative Assembly representing Rwanda. Your hand has been up, but you had also put in a comment online. Francis, I think Francos, it's French.
Yes, Françoise.
Yeah. In half a minute, please. We are already out of time.
Okay, thank you very much. It is really unfortunate that you are running out of time. But first and foremost, I wanted to appreciate all the presenters for these good and timely inputs. I'd like, just as a legislator at the East African Legislative Assembly, I'd like to add some inputs about what did not work and how we can move forward together as a team, since we are working at the region, continental, global, all efforts. First and foremost, we have realized that EASSI does not have a standalone protocol on gender equality. I know EASSI has been working tough to make sure we get many things changed, like the laws. We've been moving and acting together with the EASSI contribution, as I appreciate the work of EASSI, for instance, even the gender barometer that is being used across the region is the initiative of EASSI. But I would like to remind the audience that we need a protocol on gender equality to make sure we do our oversight as legislators. Under our functions, we have legislation, oversight, and representation. So it's very important that as you also do oversight on institutions of EASSI, like IUCA, this is Inter-University Council for East Africa, like for instance, ISTECO here in Rwanda. ISTECO is a commission that is dealing with this team. Those are the science and technology. I have been looking into those institutions and the others because we don't have time. And we found that they don't have disaggregated gender statistics on scholarships, enrollment, leadership within its member universities, and also within their courses, if I can say. So we need all those initiatives to be brought on board, and all of us to also support, because in East Africa, cultural, socioeconomic, and historical factors like colonial legacies have marginalized women in education. UNESCO is highlighting about that. So we need these anti-harassment measures. We need the child care so that we can support women economically, because they are also having a burden when they're doing their business. Cross-border opportunities are just passing through their work because we don't have a concrete data and also female beneficiaries in terms of access to cross-border opportunities is just lacking. Lastly, but not least, we have a non-assent to the EASSI bills. Those ones are the Gender Equality, Equity, and Development Bill that was passed by the House in 2017. So we want all of you, civil society, private sector, efforts to make sure we bring this bill on the table so that we can discuss it, because it is very, very key. And also prohibition of female genital mutilation bill 2016 and the counter trafficking in persons bill. I think we have a lot to say, but a lack of EASSI gender monitoring office is also something we have to advocate for gender equality as we move towards 30 years ahead. You know, let me just wind up, but we can share all these inputs even in writing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Francois. Francois. Yes, thank you so much. I think there's so much input. We could actually have this conversation further beyond this, because the time is very limited. We are going to hear from one last speaker. The next team, I think, should be coming in. Our session is supposed to end at 4. So you could share with us if it's input in writing, so that after we are going to have less than a minute to our speakers to wind up as we end the session. Less than a minute, please.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this particular conversation. My name is Bina Macedo from Kenya, team leader at Badili Africa. So I have 2 questions, and I think one will be to help this general context. And I'm here curious on how do we ensure that the political cost to shortchanging women, especially us being shortchanged in our agenda? So I'm asking that because even as we talk about women's political representation, like I can give an example in Kenya, we've been pushing for the 2/3. So I honor the contrasts, you know, CRU, they've been pushing so hard for the 2/3 gender bill, yeah? But then when you go to the communities, there's no political cost to the politician who did support the bill in parliament. Even when they go back to the community, no one is questioning them in terms of, oh, you say you're supporting the women's agenda, but then you didn't support this bill. So how do we ensure that there is a political cost to shortchanging women on their agenda? But just generally, how do we make these conversations political enough, you know? And I'm saying again, political enough, because we work generally at Vanilia, we work in salons, in chamas. And even when I have these conversations with the women networks in salons, sometimes they're not aware of how they can support what the bill is, talk about the 2/3, they're not aware of it. That is one. But then second, I'm also curious, and just writing onto the question that the previous previous person has asked in terms of gender disaggregated data. So again, I'm sorry I'm giving examples in Kenya, but I'm sure it's the same situation like mainly in East Africa. So in Kenya, we had 16,000 candidates on the ballot, but only about 2,000 were women. So 11% of the candidates were women. And only a fraction of that won. How are we also tracking the other women who did not win? Like how are we building and consolidating our numbers, especially when we say we're going to prepare women to run for office? Majority of the women, especially younger women, do not run again from office. We did track data from 2013, 2017, and 2022, and especially many young women do not run for office. So how are we then consolidating our numbers? Because if we're talking about women not having enough capital to even run for office, then how do we use our numbers as political capital? Thanks.
Thank you so much. Is it?
Yes, that's my logic in a minute.
Okay. Then I don't know whether this is the last session for the day, because I don't see the people standing by as they normally do.
That's a way forward. I'm not dealing with my name is Ivy. But I just want to say this. We have so much as let's say the African countries, the Pacific, why don't we devolve the CSW back to our homes? We have United Nations in our home, where we can have such meeting. That's how we live
a big meeting here at the UN. Otherwise, we come here, go home, wait so much. The next year comes. For me, I think what we like to do is push for CSW. We need to have our main CSW, the East African CSW, the South African and the third countries. Let us meet back home. We have so much that we need to follow. And our leaders, they don't hear us when we are here. When we are in Nairobi, they will hear us because UN Nairobi has the status of the UN in New York.
Yes, thank you so much. I think that's a key one. That's a very good one. So I'm told there's no one, so we can slightly push our time to the gentleman behind.
All protocols observed. My name is Vincent Bulus. I'm from Nigeria, originally. I just want to probably call the point for us to reflect on. All the years, 30 years plus till today, things will not really change unless one, the leaders that we so-called have leaders were not leaders. Because the reason is why am I saying so? They don't even know what they don't even know, and that makes it dangerous. Two, there's too much greed in most of them because they are guided by some kind of spirit, the cults. The cults, they belong to cults where money comes their stuff. And if you don't belong to that group, you are in trouble. You don't know what kind of contract the sign is cults, whereby we make sure you become this leader, but you will be useful, you will not be useful to the people. And three, finally, let me tell you, all of you seated here, only you here, if you know the kind of power that you have, the power of a woman, the power of a mother, you will stabilize all those theocratic groups, and you will see how you will excel like a jet. The jet will come. We don't give up. I appreciate all the presenters. I was listening very interested.
Okay, thank you so much. I think now we will give the microphone back to our speakers. They respond to some of the questions that came up, but also give their concluding remarks so that when they are done, we are also done with this session. And again, we thank the patience of the team that is online. Thank you for sticking with us. Yes, Ambassador Jude.
Yeah, thank you very much. And read some of the chat. Someone was talking about the racial vision. Really mentioned. A lot has been done about the immigrants or immigration laws since many, especially Africans. You find even like in Spain, Moroccans, Senegal, everybody is going. And from Kenya, we've had an exodus to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, maybe those other places. But the best people to help the citizens is the government. The government must work very hard to protect its citizens. And I know a lot has been done, especially like from Kenya. We have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has worked so tirelessly, even through its own department of the diaspora. There's a department that was opened that deals with the diaspora. And in turn, again, they have collaborated with diaspora from every country. And you find there's a lot of due diligence that is done whenever there's any agencies that is handling the immigrations, the government and even the people, Kenyans are sensitized to due diligence and don't just go into cons. And there's togetherness, the government, they have their own discussions, and the Kenyans or Africans are protected. So the only way to stop this exodus is creating jobs. Unless you create jobs and go deeper and create jobs, that will also protect the younger people who also want, who want easy life. And we are laughing at the last speaker who was talking about this. We should also sensitize them that having excessive riches is not what is needed. So that is all I needed to come in and say, and say that the boy child We also doing a lot about the boy child. I know we progressed talking about men going back because we realized we moved alone as a women. We did not move with our men. And that's why we find some gender bills like reproductive healthcare. Even when I also tabled the gender bill in the Senate and the 11th Parliament, and it didn't pass because of those political and some, even the men politicians also. That sensitization that they can accept gender is both men and women, some of the women. Right now, it's favoring women in most countries, but in future, it will be the men. So it's just good to accept and allow everybody.
Okay, thank you so much, Ambassador Judith. In less than a minute, we close. Well, I'm seeing people starting to.
So there's a question on how do we ensure a political cost to changing women. I think it's important that we focus on having concerted efforts to dismantle patriarchal structures that continue to really perpetuate the short-changing of women in political participation. So coming together, speaking out, dismantling patriarchal structure, and being bold, like the women and the groups that were 1985 when we came out with the tradition. But that's a lot to unpack, Sabrina, and those are some of the points I can give.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think mine is just on 2 points. One, our sister moms spoke around the CFW at national level. I think we have a stance system. I know now for the past all years, they've been leading on the regional consultation around CSW. This year it was the last one was in Botswana, so please engage with that. I know they did for the West Africa, they also did for the East as well as Southern Africa in Maputo. So let's engage with that process and also ensure that we are also adding our voice to some of these outcome documents. So you can follow up with Femnet, but I think we also need to do it at the national level, even as she was mentioning that. So I just want to see that that's important. But also, I also want us to maybe also reflect as we are going, the fact that we need to claim our space. Nobody is going to invite you to the space. Have been the countries I support, some of those, we want to do research on women's space, women's participation in budgeting processes. I said that one is not going to be a very strong case because nobody has closed that space. We need to ensure that we know where these conversations are happening and force our space to go in there. I think for me, it's very, very critical because if we wait for us to be invited to the table, nobody is going to invite you to that table. So I think we need to push, and we only need to push that with capacity building for ourselves. We need to go out there. We need to have knowledge, on the issues that are happening so that we are able to go to the space. Feminist events is actually CSW discourse. So we can go and discuss the agenda so that our own agenda is also on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanna, for that concluding statement. I think we've had a very powerful panel. I want us to have another round of applause for them. Thank you so much, Joanna, Michelle, Ambassador Judith, and Leila, for delivering such very important message to our team online, but also the colleagues that have been with us from the very beginning up to now when we are closing. I want to thank the partners that have been with us, the Powered Youth colleagues from Malawi, from Kenya, from Uganda, and those that are online, our other partners from across the region, from Tanzania, from Uganda, and the Ugandan delegation, the Kenyan team has also been very handy in supporting us to deliver this event, both online and here. You know the work that goes into preparing a side event. So we can't take your participation for granted from 2:30 until now, your patience, we thank you. And I think we are coming to the closure, and I request that we have a picture.
Yes.
For the record, Beijing at 30, but also the key takeaway for me is let's take CSW regional, EASSI, CSW, ECOWAS, and the rest. Others from me, I've been your moderator, Jocelyn Homohangi. And I thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you and have a lovely evening. So we can have a picture here. And then to our online audience, we also thank you for sticking with us. The session has ended. The conversation continues online on our Twitter space and other social media handles. We will take all the feedback. There's a lot of information that we will respond to. Thank you so much.